Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. Today I will be breaking down the most recent monthly report. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Thank you all so much for the support. Cannot do this without you guys. It is very much appreciated. Also, if you are interested, be sure to check out my new camping channel. The link can be found below in the description. So, the latest monthly report recently released, and with it comes an information overload for tons of work that is going on right now. Now, this is going to be a very long video, so do settle in, grab some snacks, grab a drink, and let's get started. Kicking off with the AI content team. Now, they continue to update the broken air traffic controller behavior throughout the main landing zones, with fixes entering the quality assurance test request process to ensure that they don't break other areas of the game, and once done, they say they will begin scheduling it for an upcoming patch. Now, this is part of this ongoing process of tackling the worst bugs. The ATC, which handles all of the allocations of landing hangars and takeoffs, is part of this old transit system, and although this might be more of a band-aid process for the time being, if it allows us to come and go more reliably, then it will be a big win for the game right now. The devs also worked with design, environment, and economy teams to iterate on the new character prototype, which includes a performance capture session to record new lines. This must be referring to Rikalo, or the Collector, who is this new NPC Banu, who will be offering item request missions in exchange for interesting crafted items. And seeing them use the term character prototype fills me with joy, as that means this Banu is not going to be the only character who does this kind of thing, and we should see many more NPCs doing a similar thing. Maybe not to this level of extravagance, but this kind of character will be beneficial throughout the verse. Now, in new initiatives, the team began looking into improvements to the dogfighting experience based on discussions with the design and mission teams, while AI Tech also tackled a handful of bugs logged by other teams and picked up from general playthroughs. So basically evolving the AI dogfighting abilities, improving what we have, making them more challenging, and their actions more diverse as well. Right, moving on to the AI features team, they improved and polished creature behaviors. Also, new tech from AI tech teams was added to close range and melee attacks as used by the Copian and Quasi-Grazers to make them more reactive to moving targets, rather than stopping or starting locomotion, allowing the creatures to react at any point during the locomotion or resume locomotion without delay if the target moves. So glad to hear this. We don't want Fauna to appear robotic, and this should just help to improve the creatures and make them more believable with more natural movements. For human AI, the team made a variety of improvements like first reaction flow escalation, which will give players feedback on an enemy's awareness state so that they can sneak past them, for example, plus support was given to allow the designers to script specific level scenarios when an enemy is spotted, such as radioing for backup. Now, this kind of stuff will certainly help to flesh out that believable PvE experience. Having diegetic feedback is very important in a game like StarCitizen, rather than some form of UI letting you know whether you've been seen or not, or how visible you are. This will allow players to actively keep an eye on the enemy and react appropriately based on what the enemy is doing, or what this NPC is doing. But also, with the NPCs soon being able to radio for backup, this leads to the potential option of perhaps intercepting before the call goes through, adding a lot more nuance to the whole PvE experience overall. Plus, we do hear about radar jammers, a handheld radar jammer later in the video, so having some sort of handheld device that could cut off communications would be very handy in this scenario. Now, it also says that smaller bug fixes and improvements were made, which will come soon, like accuracy scaling now starting from the beginning of combat rather than when the player is seen, to give more grace time. Now, this kind of thing, I don't know if it is the right approach or the wrong approach. It needs to be felt in game, but again, more nuance to PvE encounters is definitely a good thing. The aimed at perception was improved as well, which is used for detecting when an enemy is aiming at civilians, while new functionality was added so that background assignments only influence behaviors rather than completely change them. Now, also, issues were fixed with overzealous vehicle-based friendly fire, which says prevented NPCs from firing when friendly vehicles were close by, and pre-combat attack area behaviors, including the AI not moving to the area and not attacking. Quite a lot of words there, but it sounds like they're just cleaning up a lot of the annoying little bugs that impact the PvE flow, which should make a big difference at scale when all is said and done, with these encounters being more fluid and natural. Now, for the AI Game Intelligence Development team, they continued to fix StarScript crashes. They also began analysing the ongoing mission system refactoring prep for a summit being held in Manchester soon, plus they continued exploring various designs to more clearly display the master graph and its different state nodes, while also working to implement the master graph design into StarScript itself. For the AI tech team, they progressed with work that will allow them to voxelize huge areas for 3D navigation, and this will be used to create paths for AI ships and EVAing NPCs, so soon it looks like NPCs are going to potentially start trying to board our ships. The planetary navigation mesh was extended to receive further information about tall buildings to give a more efficient evaluation of the terrain altitude while keeping track of manually placed object containers. Not sure what that means. They also extended the system to generate navigation for multiple agent types based on those presets in the world, like different sized creatures and vehicles. So a lot of work there to ensure that not only human agents can navigate on a planetary surface properly, but creatures as well of all shapes and sizes. Of course, this varies from a human, a copian, a quasi-grazer, all the way to a sandworm. Now next up we have the animation team, who progressed with creatures, such as new movements for the copian, to give it more ability to traverse its environment. Plus, they worked on facial animations for an upcoming release. Hopefully, as time goes on, we will just see a lot more of this natural movement for all creatures come to be. Of course, as cool as they do look, there are still some janky movements going on. Now, for the character art team, they kicked off a new creature, continued to work through Starware Debt, and progressed with 2 new stealth armors. So firstly, love to hear about new creatures in the works. Hopefully we can see more and more fauna come along at a pretty decent rate throughout this year, as they don't just add to the environment and make the worlds feel more alive and dangerous, they also each bring new resources to collect for missions, crafting, and overall economy work too. But also, it's nice to hear about them cleaning up the debt when it comes to new features, and Starware is certainly one feature that I'm excited for. Plus, with 2 new stealth armors coming, they will soon actually work properly, as we know each armor will have its own stats and specs, but also the signature system getting updated with the new FPS radar and scanners. Using stealth armors to actually be stealthy will be meaningful, although there will be trade-offs, likely by way of damage mitigation. But yeah, I'm very excited for Starware and all that brings. Finally, the concept art team explored ideas for in-game rewards and new armors as well. Now, I'm really hoping that we get to see a lot more unique collectible items come in this year, starting with 4.1 in fact, as this Banu guy seems to be rewarding players with unique crafted items and not just credits. So that is good, as I want to be finding and collecting all manner of random items to keep or trade or just put on a shelf and have it as a talking point. Love that kind of stuff. So yeah, hopefully more in-game rewards. But again, new armors, there's plenty of work going on there. Okay, so now let's go through what the core gameplay team has been up to. I hope you're ready. This is a lot of very cool work. It starts by saying that the team is one of the primary drivers behind the Stability and Quality of Life initiative, so they have been heavily working on fixing many bugs, but they have also worked on a lot of other things too, like supporting the upcoming content with smaller features to assist in the creation of missions, sandbox gameplay, and storytelling. Now, they also concluded many of their 2025 planning tasks that will ensure the team correctly balance the need for bug fixing, quality of life updates, content support, and feature development. And I bet this wasn't an easy thing to plan out, but hopefully they can pull it off. So the team implemented minor misfires for rapid-fire FPS weapons, including a setting that allows the designers to control the duration of the delay until the weapon can continue shooting. Also, general cooldowns were added for minor and major misfires to control how much time must pass after a misfire before another of the same severity can happen. And planning was done also towards a misfire system for ship components to unify the systems and avoid tech debt, with the primary use case for this being engineering gameplay. So quite a lot to break down here, but I am sure that most of you are aware as an item, any item, be that a weapon, a tool, a ship component, and so on, as they get used more, damaged, or just age and wear down, like being left in particular environments, this will lead to various misfires, and it sounds like a way of repairing them will utilize the engineering system, so unifying these misfires to reduce the amount of complexity in the overall system. Now, misfires may feel more like a bug at first, but hopefully with visual degradation and damage, it'll become more obvious as to what is happening. Also, the sound effects can really help to determine what misfire has happened or what has caused it. But yeah, I'm excited for this system. I know a lot of people are a bit apprehensive about it, but I think overall it will lead to the intention of looking after your equipment more and maintaining it. Now, overheat animations were added or improved for some vault weapons, while integrated code changes were added to unblock downstream dependencies. Now, as we know, heat is going to be a big factor when it comes to items like components and weapons, but for the Vault FPS weapons specifically, managing its heat will actually be the difference between using it effectively or ineffectively. So there is a bit of a skill element to these new Vault weapons, and making sure you hit that sweet spot to get the biggest amount of damage is going to be quite important. Now, for engineering gameplay, the team added panels to the engineering screens to show critical information when items are selected. They also adjusted presets to enable UI pop-ups and reduced duplication and fixed various issues with presets and screen UI. Now, this sounds like they're actually providing more engineering screens that we can toggle between to present more necessary information about what seems to be each individual component. Now, for a mechanic like engineering, this is going to be vital, as information will be key to properly diagnosing an issue or seeing what a problem is and working out a fix for it as quickly as possible. So I'm happy to see them expanding the UI for the engineering panels, and hopefully we're not waiting too long until it comes into game. Now, improvements were also made to the resource network debug tool and item port localization setup to prevent errors, various player-facing issues causing the resource network to not behave as players would expect were fixed, while the coolant effectiveness calculation for items was updated. Now, I think it is of utmost importance when it comes to the engineering system that it ensures that it is logical and makes sense to what you would expect to happen actually happens, so you can intuitively figure out what could be wrong to some degree. But also, of course, skill and experience needs to be a big factor here too. But yeah, it needs to be easy to get into and intuitive to understand for those who don't want to spend every waking hour learning more about each component and so on, but also have enough depth that those who do want to spend that time learning it can do so and become the best at it, giving them a lot more benefits. Anyway, progress was made on base building, it says, with the developers identifying and fixing various bugs, particularly in the client-server flow, plus validation for buildings placed on land claims began, and localization strings were implemented. So very nice that they are working on the back-end intricacies for base building, which ultimately is not that sexy visually, but absolutely vital for the mechanic to work. So very happy to see them progressing with this system, and here is hoping that we see a lot more progress this year. I'm not expecting it to be released in any state this year, but we should still see a lot of progress on it and video updates as things continue on. Now, in regards to crafting, it says the core features are now playable using the developer UI, including the use of blueprints, variable material quality, crafting timers, and resource-dependent item stats. Plus, the basic queue for crafting multiple items at once was added. Now, this is pretty amazing to hear. This is great news. Of course, they will still need to do the player-facing UI and fine-tune all of this before it can even come into our hands, but this is moving fast. Crafting is likely something that we will see come along this year, but evolve throughout the year. We some already have it, but it's very much in its basic form. this should expose a lot more variables to the crafting process and the end result. Now elsewhere, the core gameplay team implemented basic AR marker grouping logic to reduce the amount of UI clutter in various situations, and this is currently disabled internally but available for design to validate edge cases. Now really happy to hear this. UI, or clean UI, is very important in Star Citizen, as the game is so visually pleasing, but in many situations the UI is cluttering up the screen, so yes please to just getting rid of the clutter, giving us information that we want, but also I would certainly like to have the option, mostly when on foot, to be able to toggle the UI on and off as and when I want to see it. That would be nice. Anyway, a strike team was formed to deal with underlying issues affecting the transit system, while another team continued with the ongoing refactor towards the new transport system. So they have what sounds like one team trying to hotfix the issues now, making it less of a problem and more enjoyable for us in the persistent universe at this time, while a different team is working away on the whole transport refactor, bringing it up to the new standard. Now it also says that as part of this, a new suite of debugging tools was created to identify the root causes of transit carriage and transit manager issues. The team then addressed multiple issues causing carriages to get stuck and the manager failing to correctly orchestrate transit schedules, with the team still working through a prioritized list of issues, but they have added mitigating factors to help self-repair aspects of the system where possible. So quite a lot of work gone on to the transit system. They are definitely improved already, but they are really throwing resources at this transit refactor and the transit bugs, and rightfully so. Now the team is also currently investigating poor performance in Pyro, which says is caused by entities ending up at the center of the system and dealing with issues with NPC loadouts, failing attachments, and object container setup. The team also made numerous tech debt performances and quality of life updates. Also, now the application of distortion damage to jump drives was made more consistent. Some per update hacks were replaced with proper implementation, and tunnel generation code was optimized, plus various crashes were fixed, and performance gains of up to 4 milliseconds per frame were achieved. So over the years, many bits of Star Citizen have fallen into a bad place, and it's so refreshing to see these problems, big and small, getting fixed now. Now, for flight, the team continued the initiative to improve the flight model and IFCS, with the team saying this will include many mechanical, balancing, and visual changes to improve the overall feel of flight. These will not immediately be implemented for the next Star Citizen release. Not sure if he's referring about 4.1 here, but experimented with and iterated on internally until we feel they are ready for feedback. And I can say that the Gladius in Star Citizen 4.1 does have its control surfaces moving. Not sure if there are any other ships that have this as well, so do let me know if you notice any other ships with this functionality. Now, part of this whole process involved adding jerk to IFCS to improve the overall feel of flight and smooth out all of the forces, plus a retuning pass to various ship classes to account for the changes to the flight model was also done. Now, extra G-force effects based on speed, not just acceleration, were added, and while this doesn't impact gameplay, it will add an extra layer of immersion, for example, via different camera effects. Now, for me, when it comes to the flight tunings, both visual and physical for the ship, I have to feel it in-game before I can say whether I like it or not. On paper, it can sound either good or bad, but only until I am in a ship flying around will I know whether it feels right. Now, it also says that different velocity limits per axis were implemented, and now IFCS uses goal time to max velocity with acceleration in that axis to define the velocity limit, which means, for now, velocity limit shape is defined by the acceleration limit. So I'm not entirely sure how this translates into game, but the fact that it says for now in regards to the velocity limit shape being defined by the acceleration limit tells me that there is more planned here. Anyway, it goes on to say that variable velocity limits per power assignment were added, and now assigning different power changes the acceleration and in turn max velocity. And so far I like the idea that your power assignment can impact the vehicle's velocity and acceleration limits, giving more control to the player to decide how and where to spend that power or that allocated power. Finally, for the flight changes, a core IFCS toggle was added to allow pilots to turn off various assists and fly fully decoupled, with this being used to experiment with a heavily stripped back version of the IFCS system. Now, I love the sound of this. Pretty much like turning off safety features on a car to get more performance out of it, provided you know how to handle it. So for ships, this will give you a lot more depth to the skill required, meaning players can take the time to really learn their ship and how it flies, and this will give them the edge if they want to spend that time learning it. So, happy to hear this. But for me, I am currently, with most things anyway in Star Citizen, I hold off learning how to fly a ship beyond just the general day-to-day stuff until these changes are in and not being adjusted every 2 minutes, as I don't want to have to keep relearning stuff. I will certainly spend a lot of time practicing not just flight, but every other aspect of Star Citizen to as much depth as I can when the time comes, but right now, with it being an alpha and things fluctuating and changing all the time, I do advise not spending too much time learning the stats of everything, because I can assure you everything will still change. Anyway, moving on to the radar and scanning feature, it says work included enabling delta signature markers when detected, with delta signatures referring to your vehicle kicking out a small signature of whatever type as certain actions are performed, for example, switching from nav to SEM and so forth. Progress was also made on a handheld radar jammer, as well as exposing more options to change the visuals for highlighting detected contents. Now, this sounds like a great device, a handheld radar scanner that will likely impact both FPS and ship radars, and I love that this is coming along. Also, as time goes on, do expect to see FPS gadgets of all types. CIG have big plans for not just the usual conventional FPS equipment or combat equipment, but many futuristic and sci-fi options as well. Anyway, core gameplay began work to allow vehicle interior components to be detectable and started a minor refactor of how nearby influencing signatures are handled. Now, this is excellent. Having each component emit its own individual signatures means that scanning and radars will be very systemic, and so managing your ship systems to reduce or balance your signatures will be possible and important, as players will be able to detect the exact signatures that you would expect coming from a ship based on its components. And over time, it may even be that nuanced that you will be able to identify certain items simply by the signatures they're giving off, which is essentially how the exploration mechanic was expected to work last we heard, sending out a probe over a great distance, and then analysing what signatures come back to determine what might be out there and whether it's worth further investigating. Now, I'm sure that the plan for exploration might have evolved somewhat since we last heard, but this process of scanning and analysing signatures will be a very skill-based process that having someone on board who is highly experienced in this and knowledgeable will be very beneficial. Understanding what signatures are coming back, being able to accurately identify what something might be simply by its signature readout is going to be quite a skill. Now, they also began implementing additional hooks into the room system, which will enable the design team to define background signatures that can help with radar detection being either stronger or weaker. For example, heavy PvP areas may have a lot of background noise, reducing the effectiveness of the radar and equalizing the playing field to some degree. Now, the whole signature system is of massive importance and will drastically open up a huge potential for other game mechanics. Even being on foot, your outfit, your gadgets, your weapons and items will emit a signature that you will be able to take into consideration based on what you're doing. Being able to mask signatures, even your sound, as decibels will be a detectable signature, will need to be considered, and this stuff could give you the edge in a PvP situation. Anyway, moving on, Annunciators will now start in the off state and correctly handle missing vehicle components, so basically giving out warnings as components begin to fail or malfunction or get removed, giving the pilot live information as to what is happening with your ship, even if you are not at an engineering screen. Also, Maelstrom movement constraints progressed, which says will allow the developers to limit how far broken off pieces can move. Now, this is the only mention of Maelstrom in this report. Hopefully we hear a lot more about it as time goes on, because I'm excited. It's one of the main systems I'm excited for. But this is referring to when a piece of a ship breaks off in 0G, how far it will fly. It won't fly forever like you would expect in the real world, unless another equal mass is applied, as that doesn't really bode well too much for salvage gameplay, I presume. Now, the inventory UI rework progressed with new concept art. This is an ongoing initiative, it says, to address many visual and user experience issues with the current inventory UI, including how players equip items on their character. And I am so happy to hear this. It's going to be so nice to see new UI for the inventory system, as the current one is very old and very rudimentary, and I'm not a fan of it. So yeah, improving that overall UI for the inventory is going to be a big benefit. Now, the core gameplay team also wrote various technical documents, including one for a new mission giver and a new mechanic to communicate mission progress via comm calls. And again, this is referring to the Wikalo, the Banu collector guy, as he does appear to update players on mission progress via the comm calls, which certainly is a nice new way to go about doing this kind of thing, allowing us to actually put a face to the mission, rather than it just being a bunch of script in the MOBIGLASS. And then for the mission system refactor, the team fixed various issues with mission logic not proceeding and mission properties not working correctly, plus a variety of quality of life updates were added. And finally, for the core gameplay team, they worked on various issues affecting hangars, freight elevators, the fleet manager, and more that were exposed during 4.0 preview and 4.0.1 live. Whew! A lot of work there from the core gameplay team, some amazing stuff in the works, many of which will likely start rolling out soon, some of which is already in 4.1. Okay, so moving on to the mission design team. They focused on updating some old missions that weren't included in the recent refactor. This includes ensuring existing missions fit with the new faction content. For example, combat missions will now fall under Foxwell Enforcement, with some of the new locations from the Save Stanton events being used as forward operating bases. Also, bounty hunting contracts will move under the Bounty Hunters Guild, alongside the reintroduction of the hijacked Origin 890 jump mission. Now, there is a lot of work going on for missions, both new and old. We are going to see quite an influx of these new and old missions come to the PU, plus many more corporations to build rep with. Now, for the mission design team, focus was also given to the supply or die missions, and these missions will act as a test bed for balancing future resource gathering events. And finally, for the team, they began technical conversations with the ongoing prioritization of mission quality, and these discussions are about how to improve the audio pipeline to get voiced missions and begin pushing higher production value events. So really happy to see the mission system now really taking off and getting the resources it needs, providing a lot more diverse gameplay and options when it comes to making credits, but also earning that reputation. Now, for the narrative team, they took part in a recent performance capture shoot focused on adding new narratives and characters. Again, most likely Wikalo, but I'm not sure if they have also captured others in this particular shoot for future missions. It does say that the team began planning and writing scripts for the next shoot, with the overall goal of greatly increasing the amount of dialogue in the verse, both in and out of missions. Plus, we can see the new front-end loading screen for 402, which features an in-law newspaper with headlines pertinent to the new content being released, which I'm a big fan of. I do like that way of adding narrative into the game, or at least updating us with what's going on. But finally, for 402, the team dedicated themselves to content and bug fixing, including the new resupply missions. Also, further missions are in progress for the rest of the year, including new standard issue missions, special events, and more involved narrative-focused missions. And with all of these new companies to work for, there looks to be a lot of new missions coming along, not just combat-focused. We should see the return of these maintenance missions, the charge and drain option missions as well. Plus, there are some wildlife and science-based missions, so very excited to see this influx of new missions on all fronts. Now next we have the online tech team, who made tweaks and fixes to enable more in-game items to persist long-term, like we have seen scavenged ship weapons and components, now persisting with LTP. Very happy about that. For the ongoing mission system refactor, the team worked to allow missions to communicate better between distributed locations. They also started finalizing the analytics endpoint rewrite, making improvements to network error messaging to make them more descriptive. And finally, additional optimizations were made to the territory assignment algorithm to improve robustness, while changes were made to how entities are bound over the network to lay the groundwork for use in a fully dynamic server mesh. So great to see them now talking about dynamic server meshing. Still likely quite a bit left to be done before it is ready to roll out, but it is great that they're getting on with it. Now next up we have the R&D team. They worked on the new method for large-scale soft terrain shadow generation. Support was also given to the engine team, who are currently taking steps to further parallelize rendering on the CPU side, plus the ongoing work on ground fog rendering mentioned in last month's report was temporarily put on hold to allow the team to focus on improving gas cloud detail rendering for a higher fidelity appearance. So some great work going on there to improve the visuals of these kind of large scale effects, like planetary effects, but also there was no mention of the dynamic weather system this time from the R&D team, so hopefully the work for that is almost done and can kind of start rolling out as soon as possible. Now next up we have the tech design team, who worked closely with the mission design team on upcoming content releases that we will hear about more in the future. They also prepped to set up items for scanning and began identifying what items should be scannable and what information they should reveal to the player. So excited to see the scanning and radar updates come along. It is going to be so important for many other areas of the game. Now a major focus last month for tech design was on gameplay triggers, which is a system that allows the designers to easily hook into and expose pre-existing functionality, with the team saying, "This allows us to create new gameplay with better player-facing feedback for the content teams to use. For example, easier ways to dynamically enable visual effects and sound effects, and expose ways for the designers to apply effects to players within an area." Sounds good. For the UI team, they were focused on bug fixing, user experience, and vehicles, and as part of this, they took an in-depth look at the upcoming social universe features that we saw at CitizenCon, focusing on the user experience, and this involved working out user-friendly layouts and ensuring interactions are well thought out and easy to use. Very much excited to see these social features come along, especially the org stuff, although they might be starting with just party things and getting the social aspects up to snuff. I know there is a social refactor in the works soon, but if that improves things like VoIP, partying up, being able to interact with each other and share contracts and so forth, refining all of that is going to be great news. And then move on to the org stuff. Now the devs also began implementing UI for upcoming vehicles, alongside concepting the final UI styles for 2 manufacturers. I think this is referring to the manufacturer-specific MFDs. Can't remember who we don't have yet. I think we don't have Anvil and RSI. I could be wrong, but I think they're still missing. The UI tech team spent time beta testing an improved 2D UI renderer, as the current version is difficult to improve on, and bug fix. And finally, they worked on tech to support game localization and progressed with systems to allow players to navigate menus using a joystick or keyboard without a mouse. Now finally, we have the VFX team, who prepped for content releasing this year. They also supported Supply or Die, cleaned up various work from Alpha 4.0, and progressed with an upcoming creature. So there you go, that was a lot of updates. This is one huge video, so for those of you who have made it through the whole thing, 07 to you all, I salute you. Thank you so much. There is a great deal of really exciting stuff in the works now, not to mention all of these important bug fixes and improvements for everything. This year is set to be great for Star Citizen. If they can get the persistent universe fixed, it is already making a huge difference, but with all of these other systems in play, like the mission system, engineering and signatures, and all of the work on flight and so much more, we are set for quite a big change this year, and all the while making the actual process of playing the alpha more enjoyable and feeling less like a task. Anyway, that was the latest monthly report. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. I think by the time this video goes live, we may even be at 70,000, so we'll have to look into doing this huge giveaway of really cool ships. A big thank you to everybody who has subscribed. Cannot thank you enough. Again, check out my new camping channel if you want to see me living off-grid in the real world. The link is below. Also, come and hang out when I live stream, either here on YouTube or at twitch.tv/SuperMacBrother. The link is below. You are more than welcome. Hit the thumbs up if you don't mind, it does the channel a big favour. Tick that notification bell if you'd like to be notified when my videos go live. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons and channel members. Cannot do this without you guys, so thank you for the support, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.